Well, welcome everyone to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960 AM News Talk Radio. Every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock, I bring you interviews with interesting people. And I saw this video online of this really fascinating guy in New York up, I think, on a rooftop talking about life in New York and what it was really like. And so I wanted to bring you Ceasar Barajas, who is a fascinating gentleman. We'll hear a bit about his life during this interview. But to tell us a little bit about what life is like in New York, the epicenter in at least North America of the coronavirus. So Ceasar, how are you? Welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate you for having me. Thank you again for even just allowing me to share part of these stories.
Our pleasure. So where are we talking to you from? You're from?
I am in my humble abode here in Queens, New York City, where we are in the midst of just everything. Right now I'm looking at literally a very gray and overcast sky out of my living room window. But we try to get out and about at least once a day, if nothing else, to maybe take out the trash. And that's what prompted the video. I just had reached a level of frustration because in order to go out, and I'm prior military, you almost feel like you're gearing up to go out into some sort of battle or front line of sorts. And I just had gotten frustrated with having to make sure gloves are on set, that the masks are secured. And more importantly than that is, as I was taking the trash, was seeing multiple people who weren't out and about with masks on, which is what's been recommended safety-wise. And knowing that there were many people, not just in New York, believe it or not, but across the country who aren't taking this seriously, not really grasping the severity of what's going on, or even on the opposite end of that, calling this a complete hoax and made up. It was rather frustrating.
Now, a lot of us have been watching the news about what's going on in New York. I think a lot of us have been very impressed with Andrew Cuomo, your governor. But for a lot of us, we haven't been touched by the coronavirus personally. And New York really has been the epicenter. So describe to me, if you could, other than that frustration about some people not respecting it, what is it like, life in New York today?
It's
the city that never sleeps.
The city that never sleeps right now is laying dormant. It is remarkable to walk not just through Manhattan and find empty streets, but to know that the city itself has banded together to help to combat a lot of what's happening social distance wise is being respected. I pointed out the individuals that weren't wearing masks, but there are the majority of the citizens here just taking care of each other as New Yorkers do. We're going to find ourselves being resilient and strong and take the fortitude that's within us, because you got to be crazy to live in the city anyway. So It's one of those things where it really is something remarkable to see people band together. And my partner and I both have friends who are personally nurses, doctors, technicians, physicians. I have friends who are grocery workers who are still currently working. So we've got a lot of people who are on these front lines who we think of, and that's part of what we feel like is not being shared enough of, is there are those of us who are affected. And it's one of those things that we're just trying to get people across the country to understand. The sooner we band together and keep this calm, then the sooner we can all leave our houses again.
Now, it's a little bit interesting, and maybe New York is similar, but Canada, we're respecting what the scientists and the politicians are recommending and telling us what to do. And we watch these pictures on U.S. news about these protests in different parts of the United States. And as you correctly point out, people that are calling it a hoax. What's going on? Can you explain this to us?
Brian, I'm in such a state of shock. And here's part of that reason. If you remember a few years ago, we had the protests at Standing Rock. So here are Native Americans protesting the running through of oil and drilling pipelines through their native lands. And these very same protesters who were peacefully protesting were met with what? Dogs, hoses, rubber bullets, arrests. It's remarkable. And that right there is what paints the picture of current America. Protesters on Capitol building steps, carrying semi-automatic weapons, holding up signs that literally read, "I need a haircut." And yet, no arrests, no one is rubber bulleting them, no one is hosing them, no one is sicking the dogs on them. as a person of color, I'm Latinx. My parents are, my brother and I are first generation Americans. My mother and father are from Mexico. There's a lot that I'm carrying just personally attached to those sentiments, and knowing that I am just in a position now to sort of try to help spread a little bit of this positivity and to educate people and to just try and really and enlighten people. But it's remarkable. I wish I had a complete answer for what's happening, but that right there is current America.
Well, we're talking with Ceasar from Queens and having an interesting conversation about what life is like in New York and his reaction to protests around the country and people that aren't respecting social distancing. We're going to take a break for traffic and messages and come back more with Ceasar and try to understand a little bit about his life and what it would be like to be living in Queens right now. Stay with us.
All right now.
Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Ceasar Barajas. He is a gentleman that I connected up with via, frankly, a great video that he posted. And we may actually, if he permits us, share that video again in the show, because it was really quite inspirational and concerning and just frank about what was going on in life in New York. And so I really quite liked it, and I reached out to him and invited him to on our show. And he's got a fascinating background that I'm going to ask him to tell us a little bit about. But he's also got a lot of really interesting views about what's going on in the United States, in New York right now with this COVID-19 situation. So Ceasar, welcome back to our show.
Brian, thank you so much for having me once again.
So Ceasar, let's take a step back and tell me your parents were Mexican, immigrated to the United States, and you were born in the U.S. and then you worked in the military?
Yes, my brother and I, both first generation Americans, both born in the U.S. We're Texas boys, born in El Paso, Texas, but raised in Houston. So I've got some Southern ties to me. And then joined the military right out of high school, because that was the only way that we were going to be able to supplement money for college. And I've had multiple family members who served, Marine Corps, U.S. Air Force. So going into the Navy and deciding to use that methodology in order to get to college and pay for it wasn't something that was strange. And I actually enjoyed my time very, very much. I literally was a year away from my commissioning as a naval officer. And the Navy said to me at the time, we're not going to send you to medical school, because that's what I was on track for. We're actually going back to where we currently are, this Middle Eastern conflict. So I joined right after Desert Storm, and here we are, 99, 2000-ish, and we are, as a country, deciding to go back to the Middle East and meddle and decide that we are going to do what we as sometimes Americans do and help, even though sometimes the best way to help is to not do anything at all. Anyways, with that being said, I got out of the Navy and then fell onto a path where I started teaching, and I utilized my complete collapse. I was literally near brink of suicide, standing literally on the edge of a couple of buildings at a couple points in time. And
oh my God, you're kidding! How come? Because of post-traumatic syndrome or something?
So growing up, there were traumas already attached to growing up. There were traumas already attached to being a Latinx male, and here you are growing up on the south side of Houston, Texas, so it's not really the safest at the time. So compound all of those traumas together, and I again don't mind sharing this, at 15 years old had been raped by a 19-year-old female camp counselor. So there's a lot that I was carrying aggression-wise and rage-wise, and so that turned me into a very upset young man, and found myself getting in trouble with the law on a couple of occasions. And the turning point was my wife at the time left me. She literally, I woke up one day and she was gone. And that was probably the best thing that she had to do. And I credit her bravery for even doing that, for leaving a relationship that was emotionally, verbally abusive, and on occasion physically abusive. And it just wasn't something that I was proud of. And I thought, if I don't do something about this, then I'm going to just dig myself into a hole in the ground. And I found therapy. I found meditation. I found yoga for healing, not just yoga for physical betterment, and then set myself on that path to create a smoother, more peaceful life for myself. And we're going on 10 years that I tell people I'm now emotionally sober, not without its relapses. I stole that term from somebody somewhere, and I just loved the way that it had a ring to it. And so I now consider myself 10 years emotionally sober. And that's now why I'm able to
What is
speak.
it? Is it the yoga? Is it the meditation? What is it that creates that scenario?
For me, it's realizing, once I was taught the power of my own breath. So here I am now. I teach breathing techniques. I teach meditation. There were several methods to it, but I teach on the platform of it can be done anywhere, anytime, any place. And once I realized that, it then physically activated in my brain the thought process. Oh, if I take a conscious controlled deep breath, I'm literally activating the vagus nerve in my brain, which then offsets the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for your body's rest and digest. So I was like, wait a second. So here I am. I was already an anatomy nerd. Like, I was on my way to med school. So once I realized that there was a physical connection to your body with just breathing, and then the offset of that is, oh, if I take several deep breaths, then I might feel a little more relaxed. And that's part of what we as a country don't do enough of. We're not taking enough deep breaths. You know, I can only handle so much of Trump on the TV before I have to literally turn it off, because I get so aggravated, so aggressively angry, that I have to just step away. And so part of what my partner and I do at the end of every evening is just to offset the negativity, is we go on YouTube and we watch funny, like, puppy videos, funny animal videos. So what is it that can make you feel better? And so I found myself in a position to just finally recognize that. So that's 10 plus years now, just trying to live this one short life that we've been given.
And that then launched your business that's all about meditation and yoga now?
Well, from there was actually a lot of really awesome people that I connected with. Our mutual friend, Joanne, thank you, Joanne, officially. And I randomly met in a coffee shop in New York. And here we both were yoga teachers and like-minded. And that's the simple law of attraction. Like will attract like. But I was then able to, post-military, become a teacher. One thing that most people don't realize and are aware of is I've been a professional dancer since I was 15 years old. So then I fell into the entertainment world and am now have multiple credits for film, television, musical theater, fight choreography, stunt work. So I get to do a lot of what I just love to do. And I was fortunate enough to, again, connect with people who believed in me. And so I teach now for a particular app called NEOU, N-E-O-U, where I created my own platform called The Journey, where it's about the journey, not the destination. And I teach yoga, meditation, boxing. I've been a certified personal trainer for 20 plus years. I work for an app called Aptive, which is fantastic. It's audio-based fitness, and I teach yoga and meditation for them. And then I teach for an app called Journey Meditation, where we lead live guided meditations daily. And so I, very much like you, have my own show 5 days a week. But it's an opportunity, especially now with us being social distanced and quarantined, to still continue to reach out to people. I have my own home setup here where I can record classes. I go live on camera on my laptop, like I said, 5 days a week at noon. So it's really an opportunity to continue to share these sentiments that I have, and that I'm able to just sort of parlay. And I tell people all the time, I'm not just a teacher, I'm your student as well, but I'm really more of a guide. I'm just here to sort of allow you to realize that you've got the power to choose, that you get to decide, that there are plenty of opportunities for you to take several deep breaths, especially when all of this chaos and all of this freneticism is surrounding you. And it really is an effective way to battle what is currently happening. And that's part of the reason why the video that I posted, I had reached a breaking point. And for me to reach a breaking point takes a lot.
Now, I think that mental health in this crisis is going to be a big issue. The first wave of impact has unquestionably been the health impact, and then the economic impact. And I think governments are addressing both of those waves. But I really worry that mental health is sort of the coming wave. People talk about either a lot of divorces coming out of this or a lot of babies. So either people are dealing with it one way or the other. But stress, and people I'm not sure what it's like in New York, but here in Toronto, we've had people arrested for walking in parks. And we had one incident when someone in a park that was told to leave assaulted a police officer. So people are at their breaking point. Your meditation work and breathing exercises have got to be incredibly even more useful now than ever.
That's part of the message that we're trying to convey to folks. We've always been dealing with stresses. Every single one of us is a trauma survivor. There is no need, because some people will do it, to try to measure whose trauma is worse off. My bags are bigger. It's not what we're trying to convey to folks. The mere fact that, Brian, you and I are still standing here today is the testament to our strength, our fortitude, our ability to survive. And all of that is genetically predisposed in all of us anyways. Getting people to understand that if we allow a little bit more of that, just consciousness. I'm not even going to call it meditation, because most people think meditation is sitting in lotus pose on a mountaintop, stroking your beard with, amongst the clouds. Meditation can happen, again, literally anywhere. If we were to take more moments as people to just pause, then that'll give us the concept to respond to something rather than to quickly react. I'm sure that whatever happened in this park in Toronto with this person that assaulted the police officer, 100% certain, could have been de-escalated had there been a couple of deep breaths from both parties. Everyone understands that there's frustrating things happening. My anxiety levels rise whenever my partner and I have to run to the grocery store. Why? I'm already a nervous person. I'm not huge on crowds. And now with social distancing, it's a little nerve-wracking to feel someone right on my shoulder. Or if I'm walking down our neighborhood streets and I hear a jogger approaching and I turn and the jogger's not wearing a mask, then for me, the jogger is just spewing whatever it is that's coming out of their body to everyone they pass. And so I have to stop, and I can only control what I feel. None of these external environments are even remotely possibly being able to be controlled by me. So it's a unique opportunity to come back again to just breathing. And this is part of what I teach and just try to remind folks of.
So I did do a meditation class once. It was the most boring 45 minutes of my life. I counted to 7 frontwards and backwards for 45 minutes. And my God, what a waste of time. You've got
and that was your first time like taking a meditation class?
Yes.
See, I never would have recommended 45 minutes. Brother, that's too long. You cannot get the average person to sit for 5 minutes. So I hope that at some point you'll try meditation again, or I'll send you the links to all of my apps. I teach from 2 minutes to 20. And most of my longer meditations, I gear towards walking meditation so that people can just be out and about or running errands. And I've had such a positive feedback from that. It's been such a wonderful thing to hear people. And I get on the daily messages from folks saying, hey, thank you. This has saved me today. My kids were driving me crazy and my husband didn't do what he was supposed to do. And so I was able to go take this 30-minute walk. But yes, I hope that at the next time you decide to take a meditation class, that it's a little bit shorter and that we find it a little bit more suitable to your palate.
I do think the walks is a really good recommendation. I had someone who suffered from mental depression, was close to suicide. And the solution for them was something they called forest bathing, which was just walking out into a forest. And one of my concerns now with the restrictions in our parks is that people aren't allowed to get out and walk in their local parks, their local forests, et cetera. And, it's a concern to me because, well, particularly you living in Queens or people in Manhattan that are living in apartments or condominiums without, a lot of extra space. We need to get out into nature.
I wish we had a local park or forest we could walk through. I have many, many, many friends from Canada and have always enjoyed going up to visit them, Nova Scotia, Toronto, Ottawa, and any chance we could. It was amazing to just be able to leave the city and then be amongst the nature. It's something remarkable to be able to just take that walk. And so yesterday I had to take a few packages to the post office and just really took my time. So even though I was walking through our New York City streets, it was still something to be outside, and it was decent weather and the sun was shining. All of that really, really makes a difference and is effective in just trying to help reduce whatever stresses or anxieties you might be feeling. After I had been officially diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, depression, and anxiety, part of that is what led to here, we can take these next steps therapeutically. And I got asked point blankly by a therapist, what is it that you enjoy? Well, I love being outside. I love trail running. I lived in Los Angeles for 7 years before I moved to New York. And my go-to out in LA were all of the hiking trails. And so I can imagine the frustrations in not being able to utilize that. So maybe instead of the forest bathing, you take that walk that is maybe around the block, or sit in the sun. We own here in the house they call it a SAD lamp, seasonal affective disorder lamp. So it's a UV lamp that mimics the sun's rays so that you can sit and just feel as if you have the warmth of the vitamin D, which is much, much, much needed to just maintain a semblance of health and wellness.
Well, it's actually a little bit ironic that one of the things they say, AIDS immunity, our immune system, and is a great, one of the extra remedies for coronavirus is vitamin D. And that's what, when we're all staying at home, we're being a little bit restricted of because we're not getting enough. Anyway, we're going to take another break for traffic and messages and then come back more with Ceasar because he's got a bunch of political views. And so what I want to do is I want to switch now from his background and meditation and yoga and ask him about what's going on in the United States of America today. Stay with us. Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We're chatting with Ceasar Barajas from somewhere in Queens, and I'm going to ask him where exactly in Queens he is at in New York City, the epicenter of the coronavirus here in North America, if not, frankly, the world right now. And we've just been chatting about his military background, some mental health issues that he had, and that he solved it. And he's now been, he says, 10 years
emotionally sober.
Emotionally sober, which actually sounds pretty good. And teaches online meditation and breathing techniques and yoga and things like that. But Ceasar, I want to come back to this video that you posted, and you had this frustration in the video, and you've expressed it a little bit already today with how some of your country people are responding to COVID-19. Tell me a little bit about your frustration with that.
Well, first off, if you don't mind, would love to preface it with saying in the intro that you so eloquently described me with, you mentioned that I had mental issues and solved it, and would like to point out that they're not. It is an ongoing battle. Again, I was officially diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, anxiety, and depression from a multitude of traumas over the course of my life, and realizing that there was a reason for why I thought the way I did and acted the way I did. But it has been reminded to me by multiple therapists over the years, and just in learning through my teachings, it's going to be ongoing. So raising the mental health awareness is one of those platforms that I proudly stand on. Nothing is solved, and part of what led to the video on the rooftop was that I was reaching a serious breaking point where I didn't know what to do, and I'm not usually one person to point out and share my personal frustrations, because I'm on this pedestal as a teacher and a guide, but that's part of why I think people resonate.
And this breaking point was what? Caused by people not...
It was a multitude of things over the previous few days, but I am just as human as everybody else. And so here we are coming up on, oh my God, yet even more of these ridiculous White House briefings. We've got the president of our great nation. Like, I'm proud to be an American. I served in our US military proudly. I have friends who still are in the military who are literally commanding officers of bases and ships. And it is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, again, to be in a position where we as Americans are being led literally by a crime syndicate of a US government. And I am openly adamant about my frustrations with that. So you take the government approach to things. Then you take the fact that prior to all of this pandemic, we were in a position as a country where we were dealing with multiple cultural issues, systemic racist issues, culture, or I mentioned culture, gender issues. So here we are being what I feel led by a government with people in power and people in position who are objectifying, misogynistic, racist. And so that was something that I carry and had carried. And then I literally, like I said, had to gear up to take the trash out. Here in Astoria, Queens, you asked where we were, we're in Astoria, Queens. The trash is outside the building. And anytime I leave the house, I freak out. It is such a stress-filled activity to just leave my front door, knowing that I could potentially make someone sick or someone could get me sick. So there's that stress. And so the safest place that I feel is on my own rooftop. We're luckily on the 5th floor, so all we have to do is walk up 10 steps and we have access to our roof. And that's what prompted me to pull out the phone and just be like, yo, you guys need to calm the F down. This is not something that is being made up. It's not a hoax. My partner and I both know people personally who have died. We know people who have lost people. So we know people friends-wise. Again, we have friends who are actual healthcare workers in our current New York City hospitals who are describing to us the atrocities. We have friends who are doctors and nurses in Houston, Texas, Las Vegas, Nevada, Phoenix, Arizona, who are all healthcare workers who are describing to us these particular atrocities. So yes, that's what led to the frustrating video share.
There's a hospital in Queens that's been much in the news because I guess it is public
Elmhurst,
hospital.
yes.
Beg pardon?
Elmhurst is the hospital you're speaking of, yes.
Is it close to you?
No, it's actually, I mean, well, everything is in New York is close. We're only literally a couple of miles away from anything. But in proximity to our neighborhood, it's about 2.5, 3 miles away.
So, you know, in Canada, we have public medicine. And so it's one healthcare system for everybody.
I'm on that.
Well, it's been interesting listening to Governor Andrew Cuomo, and he talked, and I don't think I have the numbers right, but approximately right. He said there were something like 112 private hospitals in New York State and 8 public hospitals, and the public hospitals were getting, you know, just drowned in cases. And they were, for the first time, he was trying to persuade the hospitals to transfer patients from the public hospitals to the private hospitals. And it sounded absurd to a Canadian when, you know, we have one hospital system and the patients go wherever we have capacity to deal with them.
I agree with you. The absurdity lies in that private hospitals are able to prioritize who they see because of the amount of money they might be able to make. It's part of the reason why we as a government are fractured. We are run, I think, personal opinion, not the opinion of Brian's show, that pharmaceutical companies, the Philip Morris companies that run the tobacco and the food, all that stuff, that's who is influencing a lot of our representatives and senators and congresspeople in order to push certain bills. That's why over the course of the last 2 weeks, since our stimulus package had been shared with individuals, first off, the stimulus package, thank you very much for the government even being able to say, we're going to give everyone money. But you're expecting people, and me as a New Yorker, and I can only speak to myself, you're expecting me to live on $1,200 for 10 weeks when my rent itself is $1,500 for 1 month. And yet we're still having to pay rent. So I'm in a very lucky, and I say lucky because there are 22 million Americans who are unemployed right now. I'm in a very lucky position where I'm still working. So I can pay my rent, but I have friends who cannot. I have friends who are hustling so hard to just try to drive up some sort of money in order to have money to go get groceries. So you take away the stimulus package, who has benefited billionaires. They've made more money in the last 3 weeks than money that was dished out. So that's one element of why this system is broken. Then you take, again, the fact that we're not still addressing the social injustices. Fortunately, we haven't had a school shooting in a while. The month of March was the first time in, I think, 9 years that we didn't have a school shooting. That's because we weren't in school. So you've got your gun lobbyists dictating, well, that goes to show you that it's the people. Well, whatever the argument might be, we're on such opposite ends of the spectrum that it's rather difficult to try to figure out how we can then collectively come together to advance us forward. I don't know how we're going to recover from 22 million people unemployed. We have, my partner and I keep referencing, friends who are business owners, cafe owners, cookie shop owners, dress shop owners. They're not going to survive. I have friends whose studios aren't going to reopen because they don't know how they're going to be able to climb out of this hole. And so to go back to the hospital systems, when you have a pharmaceutical company who is dictating to a private hospital healthcare system, this is what you need to do in order to make this money. There are people that are being turned away at these private hospitals. We're talking about hospitals. We're talking about places that house doctors who took the Hippocratic Oath. If you're not familiar with, that's the oath and the pledge to take care of anybody, anywhere, anytime. These hospitals are turning people away because they know that these COVID cases are not going to be long-term. They know that if they intubate someone, that the potential of them passing away and not surviving is higher. And they would rather find people that they can, over long-term, drain money from. It is a horrifying thought, horrifying. And so I walked by on my way to the post office yesterday, I mentioned earlier, Mount Sinai Hospital here in Queens. And you've got these huge tents that are the cleansing tents. It's part of like the biohazard community in order to cleanse people in and out. And I can't imagine having to walk in and out of this hospital setting. A girlfriend of mine in Houston, one of my sisters down in Texas, is a nurse practitioner and put up a 4-minute long video because that's how long it takes her to put on every single piece of equipment in order just to enter a room. And that's if the healthcare worker, nurse, technician, doctor, custodial staff has the equipment. It's not a good place. We're not.
Your frustration is obviously very evident in your passion and your frustration. What's the solution? What's the solution to these 22 million people unemployed? What's the solution to all these cafes and restaurants and studios that are going to go bankrupt and are not going to be able to open? What do you think the government needs to do?
I honestly, firmly, wholeheartedly believe that in order for us to survive as a country, there has to be, Allah, God bless him, Governor Cuomo, there has to be someone at the top dissipating a structured, positive plan. And I'm not talking about positive, like everyone take a deep breath. I mean, we all need to take an F and D breath right now. But figure out who it is that we can rely on to share information, legitimately researched, sound information. This is what we need to do. And we already know, because we learned from South Korea and China, we have to gather tests. We have to test people. We have to figure out where the highest points of outbreak are in order for all of that to be contained. We have yet to be tested. My partner and I are both post-COVID. We haven't even talked about that, Brian. We were sick. We spent a month thinking we were going to fucking die. And we couldn't get tested because we were told we were only allowed to be tested if we were hospitalized. So you want to wait until you have to intubate me in order to test me. We had every symptom. We luckily, by the good graces, survived. This is honestly the first day in the last 28 days that I've been able to speak without having to consistently clear my throat and catch my breath. So we are getting stronger. And we know people who have been
one of the lucky ones that have actually been infected.
Exactly. So the solution is test us, put out the tests, stop instigating these protests, stop as the President of the United States haphazardly, not my fault, I have nothing to do, it's the governor's solutions.
So in 1918, 1919 with the Spanish flu, the second wave and third wave were larger and more lethal than the first wave. And it was because different cities, different states around the United States, different provinces and cities in Canada opened up too early. As we see Georgia opening up tattoo parlors and massage parlors and hairdressers, Florida opening up the beaches. Like, what gives? What's going on? Do people not read history?
No. They don't. And please notate that the leaders in these particular states, Georgia, Florida, right-wing, Republican, Trump supporters, there's too much of a pattern.
Okay, so let's talk about that. I'm a news junkie, I'm a political junkie. I watch CNN and Fox. It's like there's two different worlds going on.
And that is part of the freedom in America. You have a right to say whatever you want, and the misinformation is what's hurting us. It is knowing that you have a listener paying attention to Fox and knowing that that's where they gather their news sources, and they're being given false information. Talk about fake news, Jesus. And then you have the actual news sources. You have Brian's show. You have multiple people who are trying to just let people know that this is actually what's happening. You have reporters who are trying to ask legitimate questions that need to be answered of our US government, being told that they need to calm down. You know, the reporters are asking legitimate questions, and the White House briefings are being cut short. Or Trump throws a friggin' tantrum and decides that, you know, he doesn't want to answer the question about his relations to Putin and Russia. It's too much of it. It has been chaos since day one. Since the day he was elected, it brought out, I liken it to, it brought out the worst in people, because they now see publicly that it's okay to behave that way. And we're not without our negative. We're not without people who have certain thoughts and processes. I'm going to speak directly to white supremacy. The country was ill-founded in the fact that all men are created equal, when that's a friggin' lie. They're not. When you come through here, and let's take historically over the years, social redistricting, the fact that as a man of color, I'm bald-headed, Latino, tattooed. I can't tell you how many times I've been stopped by the police. Like, there's just a lot. We can't talk about enough the gender inequality. You know, the mere fact that women weren't allowed to vote until X amount of time. Like, you know, we're not really seeing much of the glass ceiling shattered until really the last 30 years. But really, the brunt of who is in charge now is still those individuals that carry very negative thought processes. And that right now is what is prompting our government and some of its leaders to do what they're doing. Reopen the beaches. Why are the beaches essential? Why are not people paying attention to social distancing? Because it hasn't affected them personally. Most of those, like when we go back to that footage of the spring breakers in Florida, like 3 or 4 weeks ago, I'm young, I'm healthy. I'm not going to get affected. And then you find the numbers of them who were then affected. You know, I'm going to go to this wedding because we're going to celebrate. And at that wedding, that one person that came in affected 16. Like it's that. It's like, please wrap your brain around anything other than yourself. And so that's why Trump right now is at such odds with our governors, who are most of them are Democratic. There are Republicans now who are coming to the forefront and saying, no, this is wrong. We don't agree with this. You can't do this. So that's why the frustrations lie with where I'm at. And I'm obviously like you. I'm a political junkie. I want to be informed. I want to stay up to date informationally. And I'm also an empath. I teach and emotionally support people for a living. So when people aren't being emotionally supported, it's frustrating. And it turns into, I'm going to go on my rooftop and I'm going to vent for 8 minutes and yell at people.
Ceasar Barajas from Queens, thanks for sharing with us your frank and somewhat disturbing, but frank and honest view of what's going on in politics in the United States today. Stay with us. We're going to come right back after some traffic and messages. Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. This has been a fascinating chat with Ceasar Barajas from Queens, talking about his frustration with what's going on in the United States today. The separation and conflict between some states that are led by right-wing people that are denying what's going on, and other states that are are beset with the virus and are dealing with it with social distancing, healthcare, etc. And then also talking a lot about his mental health issues and how he's been dealing with it, and being 10 years emotionally, what was it?
Emotionally sober.
Emotionally sober. I love that. I'm gonna have to remember that.
Thank you.
So Ceasar, what are the things that are motivating you today? What are your sort of passionate projects?
I, again, am fortunate to be involved with a multitude of projects and people that I love and care for. I reached a point in my life where if it doesn't affect me positively, then I don't want anything to do with it. And it took a lot of work to get to that point. But I'm one of the things I'm most proud of is I serve currently as an ambassador and master teacher for the Veterans Yoga Project. So we bring yoga, meditation, and breathing techniques to active duty armed forces members, veterans, as well as their communities, because a military spouse is serving just as hard as an actual active duty military member. So we bring to those communities yoga, breathing techniques, meditation, and we allow people to realize the power and healing benefits of yoga and meditation. And I serve on their board. My partner is the social media content coordinator. So if you wanted to visit VYP online streaming classes on Facebook, since the social distancing and the quarantine was put into effect, we now have daily classes that you can go online via Zoom or mostly Facebook and see different teachers from across the country teach people. So it's everything from breathing techniques to meditation to yoga nidra to actual physical yoga classes. And again, the fortunate place that I'm in to allow myself to work for people that care for the projects that we teach for. And it's one of those things where I learned being a Veterans Yoga Project. And you're welcome to go into www.veteransyogaproject.org for more information on how you can help support or donate. And coming from a veteran background myself, it really is a testament to what it is that I teach. And then again, I'm able to teach that to the aforementioned apps that I...
And Ceasar, if people want to connect up with you and go to one of your apps, do you have a website?
You are always please welcome to join me on social media. Follow me at Ceasar F Barajas, Ceasar F as in Fernando. B as in Bravo, ARAJAS. I absolutely love hearing from people and welcome all questions, concerns, comments, complaints. I love engaging with folks, as you may or may not already know.
Well, Ceasar, I hope we stay in touch, and I look forward to following you and seeing more of your videos. We're going to take one last break for traffic and messages, and then I'm going to come back with a couple of my concluding comments because I think this has been a fascinating conversation with Ceasar tonight. Stay with us. Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. You know, I think that it's been really quite illuminating chatting with Ceasar Barajas from Queens today. I think, you know, he does talk about a bunch of issues that we really need to frankly have a very deep conversation about. Let's take us back to the Great Depression, 1930, 1933. The US government and the Canadian government, both at that time, had leaders that were almost like Donald Trump, telling us it was going to get over soon, being positive, selling hope, and nothing happened, nothing worked. And it took 3 years or so before Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected in late 1933 and then implemented in 1934 the New Deal. And comparably in Canada, it took a change in government later on in the early 30s to have people that really addressed the unemployment issues. But what also happened, in addition to dramatic government fiscal stimulus, was a lot of other changes. And some of the changes that Ceasar was talking about. We had some of the most important social programs of our whole history instituted at that time. Some of the most important restrictions on business excesses instituted at that point in time. The Securities and Exchange Commission was instituted at that time as part of FDR's New Deal. And I think we changed our attitudes toward other people during that time period. And so I think that one of the challenges we got right now in Canada, the United States, frankly, probably around the world, is we really have separated in these two different solitudes of right versus left, and fake news, and criticisms of disbelief on, frankly, both sides. Somehow we've got to come together, and we need to have, number one, the leaders that are going to be able to do that. And, you know, I think we've seen some of those leaders in Canada, and we've seen some of those leaders in the United States, and we've also seen some of the people that cannot provide that leadership. And then in addition, what we also need is we need to have the followers. We need to have people that are going to be listening to those leaders and then are going to actually be following them rather than complaining constantly about fake news and protesting, etc. So I think that's the number one thing we need to do. The number two thing I think we need to do is we need to think about some of our social programs, and healthcare, public healthcare clearly has been underinvested in. I think this has been proof that the healthcare system in the United States works better than the healthcare system in Canada works better than the healthcare system in the United States. And yet at the same time, we have underinvested in Canada. And so we need to do a better job there, because we need to not just deal with the typical problems. We need to have a healthcare system that can deal with maybe not the once every 100-year pandemic, but certainly worse than we've had on a typical year. And then I think we need to think through this issue that Ceasar talks about, these people that are trying to live on $1,200 in 12 weeks or whatever it is. And effectively the government subsidies and monies that have been granted have been comparable to guaranteed annual income suggestions that we've had made in the past. And I think a guaranteed annual income, whether it's in a direct payment from the government or whether it's through our tax system, is something that we need to honestly think through, because we need to make sure that as we go through whatever the changes, climate change problems, globalization problems, automation problems, et cetera, we're going to have a lot of things that are going to beset us in the future. COVID-19 is just one starting example of it. And we need to have a social system, a social safety net that takes care of all the vulnerable. Anyway, that's my ideas. And I think Ceasar has elevated a bunch of them to us from the United States. Ceasar, thank you so much for joining us on the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.